I am so eager to talk about the first episode of the new Star Trek series, Star Trek Picard. Now, I realize that not all of you have been able to see it, so I will keep this, and this is so hard, I will try to keep this spoiler-free, even though I would love to do like a deep dive and comb through this episode, because there's so much in this first episode, so many Easter eggs, so many good things. I have a ton of theories about the story, but I want to spare those of you that haven't been able to see it yet, either because they are unable to watch it. This has just been launched last Friday, I think or last Saturday it went live, and but also a lot of people don't have a subscription to, in the United States, CBS All Access. That's where you get the new Star Trek stuff, and in parts of the rest of the world, you can watch this series on Prime Video from Amazon. And also, that is not everyone. So I'm very well aware that some of you may even only watch this later on when it appears on, I don't know, on Blu-ray or DVD, or by other means of consuming this content. So I'm going to contain myself, which is super hard, but I do want to give you my first reaction to this series. Is it any good? And maybe I can answer the question, if I wouldn't have a subscription to CBS All Access or Amazon Prime, would this be the reason for me to get a subscription? Well, let me answer that question right away. Yes. Oh, yes. This is so good. This is so much better than what I thought they could do with the whole concept of bringing back Jean-Luc Picard, that I would totally get a subscription, even if only for the duration of the series, because they're posting this every week. Very similar to what Disney Plus did with The Mandalorian. So you get an update every week, a new episode to enjoy. But then there is going to be a hiatus, and then they're going to film the next series. The second season has already been greenlit. They dared to do that without even having tested this with the worldwide audience that is currently watching the first few episodes. So that is, I think, a huge indicator that CBS and Amazon Prime, that they are very confident that the quality of the series is so good that this will be a hit. But I can imagine that, well, people will just take a subscription for 6 months, or well, no, maybe even less, because I don't even know how many episodes there are going to be in this first season. But for the duration of the first season, they will subscribe. They may also be able to watch, if it's CBS All Access, you can watch Star Trek Discovery as well. So for those of you that have held out on that may be an extra reason to get CBS All Access. I don't have any affiliation, by the way, with those streaming platforms. So I'm just saying, as a Star Trek fan, that's what I would do. In my part of the world, it's slightly different. Star Trek Discovery is on Netflix. And, well, I already had a Netflix subscription, so I loved that series. 2 seasons are already on Netflix. But this one was, well, Amazon Prime made a deal. And so they have that. So in my country, you have to have both subscriptions, both Netflix and CBS, and Prime Video. There is some other stuff on Prime Video, not that much here in the Netherlands, but if only for Star Trek Picard. Now, after having seen the first episode, for me, it's totally worth having those 2 subscriptions to be able to follow all that new Star Trek content, because both in the case of Star Trek Discovery as well as for Star Trek Picard, I think these are glory days for Star Trek fans. All right, let's talk about Star Trek Picard. What makes it so good? Well, first of all, what makes it so good, it is Jean-Luc Picard, and he is back, and he even says, engage. That is not a spoiler, because that was in all the trailers, but I didn't expect it to be part of these first few episodes. Patrick Stewart is back, reprises the role, and there is at one point somewhere in the first episode, I'm not going to tell you in what circumstance, but someone tells him, be the captain they remember. And that is fulfilled partially in a sense that he is absolutely the Picard that we remember from Star Trek The Next Generation. He's got the same authority, the same charism. He has aged, but that becomes part of the story. And not only has Jean-Luc Picard aged and changed, but so, and even more so, has the world and has the politics, the whole situation in this Star Trek universe. And that is what makes it so interesting, because you see the captain that you remember, and of course he's not a captain anymore, because he's left Starfleet, basically. Again, that's not a spoiler, that's straight from the trailers. And he now lives in France, and he lives where he always dreamt he would end up at the end of his career, at Chateau Picard. We even hear him speak French to his dog, but still. And as you know, Patrick Stewart is not French, even though he's portraying someone who's supposed to be from France, Jean-Luc Picard. He does an admirable job trying to speak a few words in French, but it is... Well, I'm pretty fluent in French, and you can tell that, he's not a native speaker. But then even that is also used in the series, because then he immediately adds that he's still learning to speak French. So either he's trying to relearn French, or maybe, and I don't know all the ins and outs of the history of Jean-Luc Picard, maybe he's been away from France from when he was a kid, and, well, he never got the opportunity to learn it very, very well. I don't know. But anyway, so he lives in France, he's got his vineyard, he's retired. And then, of course, every good story starts with, let's say, the status quo, everything seems to be balanced, everything is okay, and then there's disruption. That's a classic story element. So what's the big disruption here? Well, his world is about to be turned upside down by, again, I'm only referring to what you've been able to see in the trailer. And if you've seen the trailer, you still don't know what this episode is going to be. But there is this mysterious girl, this young woman, and she shows up in his life, and there is a total uprooting of his existence. He needs to take action, and that's where the story all of a sudden takes off. What makes this series so compelling, at least this first episode, is that they honor the past. They honor Star Trek The Next Generation, even the entire Star Trek legacy. There are so many little clues and very, very cool flashbacks and Easter eggs. This is a freeze frame episode where every minute there is a cool Easter egg, and you have to hit pause and take a note. That's what I would love to do in another episode, is just to do a deep dive and share and just fanboy about all these little, reminiscences of the past. But it's not just, well, let's just redo what fans expect. This is not fan service. What they do is they take all those familiar elements, but they put them in the background of a totally new story. And it's also a very new chapter in the life of Jean-Luc Picard. He's not only the captain that people remember. He's not just the Picard that people remember. He's also a new Picard in a certain way. He has to react to a new situation. The world has moved on. Sometimes some people don't even remember him anymore. But also Starfleet has changed. The whole political spectrum has changed, and he doesn't recognize it anymore as his world. So just like we are new to this world, Picard is kind of our proxy in this first episode to experience this new reality of San Francisco in the future, the next phase in Starfleet history, and it's not all is well. That, of course, is a very important element for the storytelling. Otherwise, you don't have a plot. Things are wrong. And the story needs a hero. The story needs someone to stand up and either remind people of what Starfleet used to stand for, what he stands for. He has to fix a broken situation. And what makes this first episode so intriguing is that it combines nostalgia. It also has a lot of mystery. There are a lot of things happening, and you try to connect the dots, but you don't have enough information yet. Even the first episode has you sitting on the edge of your seat, and a lot of stuff is already explained in the first episode. So they do reward you paying attention to this mystery, but at the same time, it sets up a lot of pieces of the game that will play out in this first season and maybe even in the second season. So it is very gratifying. It does require some concentration. As you can imagine, there is a lot of exposition. We need to basically get up to date on the situation of Jean-Luc Picard, situation of our planet Earth, of Starfleet. And so it's very clever exposition. They use the trope of an interview. And so through the questions of the person that interviews Jean-Luc Picard, we get a lot of that information. So it's done, I think, in a very clever way. But still, it's a ton of information. But if you pay attention, a lot of that sets in motion your mind as a Star Trek fan. It's like, oh, but could that mean that? But wait a minute, was that happening in the Kelvin timeline or in the other timeline? And so it's super engaging, and it made me immediately go back and rewatch that episode. And in that respect, in a certain way, I think that this episode was even better, dare I say it, as a Star Wars fan than the first episode of The Mandalorian. I am a huge fan of The Mandalorian, but The Mandalorian those episodes still tell small stories. They're more or less self-contained. There is, of course, the big surprise. There is the child, etc. But every episode, once you've seen it, maybe what I do is to go online and watch a YouTube video giving me some of an explanation about the Easter eggs or something like that. But I haven't felt the need to go back and rewatch the series again. I feel like I'm super eager to know what's going to happen in season 2. But, once I was done watching those episodes, there's not much reason for me to immediately go back. With this episode, with Star Trek Picard, I was like, I can watch this one at least 3 or 4, 5 times because it's stuffed with information, with things, with visually also. This is stunning. I cannot believe what they did with the budget. I don't know if this series has a bigger budget than The Mandalorian. And as you know, The Mandalorian had a huge budget, but it was actually filmed on a very high-tech indoor set. Even though it looks as if it's all happening outdoors, they used the same kind of rear projection system that Jon Favreau had been using for The Lion King. And so they are applying that same technology to The Mandalorian, and that's why it's got that huge scope. It feels like it's all over the planet or all over the galaxy, although everything was filmed on set. With Picard, there is a combination of real-life sets. So, for instance, the Vineyard, France. I'm pretty sure that they did not film that in France. Maybe they just went to California and filmed it somewhere in the United States. After all, a vineyard, all vineyards kind of look the same. Maybe there's also a little bit of enhancement that's happening with the footage that they shot. But at least it's outdoor. It's filmed on the location of a real castle. Even some of the interior sets kind of look real to me, as if they were filmed inside a real building. And it's not, I may be wrong, this may be a studio set, but I couldn't tell. That's how good it all looks. But it feels like they've gone on location. And then there are also a ton of scenes that happen in very futuristic worlds. Of course, if you go to visit Starfleet headquarters in San Francisco, none of that, of course, exists in real life. So you know that this was, CGI trickery, green screen work. They probably went to some locations like modern buildings that look very futuristic, because that too was definitely in some of the scenes. Later on in the episode, you see them walking around in a real environment. It's not green screen. But they combine that with fantastic digital sets that look so good and so especially colorful. There's a very, very colorful first episode. And then you have the stunts. There is fighting. There are pursuits. There is a lot of, I would say, Alita Battle Angel type of action. And it is amazing. So also the choreography of the fights in this first episode, wow, hats off. This is so much better than I thought they would do. And we're very far away from let's say the budget and also the style of the Next Generation episodes. Even the later seasons, that was still very much a serialized type of approach where everything was filmed on a set. Like the bridge of the Enterprise was made to look almost like a living room, a futuristic living room. Because, of course, you can cut so much of the costs by having a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the action take place in one fixed location of a bridge. It was, I think, a fantastic idea of the original Star Trek to have a lot of the action take place on the bridge. And if your ship gets hit by, I don't know, torpedoes, you just shake the camera. You don't have to shake the set. It is a very cost-effective way of doing things. And then if you have these away missions on a planet, well, we'll just build a simple set with some plastic rocks and we'll add some green screen work and some colored lights. But here, this is anything but that. Everything looks, to me, on the level of a cinematic experience. I was not a fan of the later Star Trek movies that came out, and especially Star Trek Nemesis, the final installment with the crew of the Next Generation, was not really my thing. I didn't think the story worked. There were so many compromises in that script, and a lot of disappointments. And I'm not surprised that the movie didn't do well at the box office, and ultimately led to the cancellation of Star Trek in general. We've had many years without any Star Trek because, well, Nemesis didn't work. What I think is that this first episode looks 10 times better than any of the previous Star Trek movies. And this is just TV. But what it also does, and I have to applaud the writers for trying this, it does honor the story, the legacy, not just of the television series, but also the events. Even in that bad movie, Star Trek Nemesis, all the plot lines, the story elements, the death of Data, that's not a spoiler, right? That was in that movie. If you haven't seen it, then why are you watching this? But the plot wasn't very good, but they do take the results, the consequences of that story, and integrate it into this startup story for Jean-Luc Picard. And it is almost a bit, it's not really retconning, but it is giving more weight to that movie, because now you know how much that story is important as a basis for the story of this first season. And I always love it when movies do that. I also love that of the Clone Wars. I'm watching Star Wars, the Clone Wars right now in preparation for season 7. And just watching all those storylines that I had no idea were there because I'd never watched Clone Wars before. They want me to go, they help me to want to go back to the original movies, to the prequels, both the prequel that preceded the Clone Wars timeline and the third prequel, because now it makes so much more sense. There's a lot of the plot holes are now filled in. I know the characters much better. And what I think is that already this first episode is enough reason to go back to Star Trek Nemesis and rewatch that movie. And maybe that movie will even contain some more clues for how this story will develop. So, all in all, final conclusion, is it worth having a subscription to either CBS All Access or Amazon Prime just for Star Trek Picard? I would say, as a Trekkie, yes. By all means, yes. This is fantastic television. This is a rebirth, in a certain way, a second rebirth of Star Trek as a franchise. I like this even better than I like Star Trek Discovery, and way better than the J.J. Abrams reboot. So I'm a very happy camper. And one final remark, I really don't get the negative reviews. it's almost as if some media corporations or newspapers just want to write down something negative. This is one review on Entertainment Weekly, and it's like, can Star Trek Picard ever recover from the disaster that is the first episode? I was like, dude, are we walking around in the same hollow suite? Have you been watching the same thing as I've watched? And I know from the reactions all over the internet, I'm not alone. A lot of Star Trek fans loved this first episode and can't wait to see the rest of the season. So I don't know what Entertainment Weekly is why they're writing that negative stuff. Something tells me it's just to get more eyeballs because, well, negativity apparently is good for engagement and good for the views. Well, I don't want to be part of that. If no one watches this or listens to this review of mine because it's too positive, then so be it. I love Star Trek. I love Star Trek Picard. And I love what they've done.